players playing for win and in here in round 6 of Grand Prix Copenhagen. Hello and welcome to this round 6 of Grand Prix Copenhagen. It's our win and in round. Michael Laurent there against Javier Dominguez. That 10 next to his name, that's not his life total. That is his current ranking in the world standings. 10th in the world, Javier, World Championship finalist. And he's kicking things off with Islands. Michael Laurent has a Glacial Fortress. It looks like we have a good old-fashioned blue-white control mirror. How do you feel about that, Joel?
Well, I mean, I'm not opposed. Well, it doesn't seem like it is one of those mirrors. In fact, it seems like maybe some kind of Esper mid-range deck I'm seeing here.
Knight of Malice is certainly not a card I would have anticipated off a first-turn Glacial Fortress, but that's the world that we apparently live in here. Syncopate dealing with the first threat. Javier Dominguez settling quite nicely into the control role.
Very interesting.
Meanwhile, Knights all around on the left-hand side of things from Michael Laurent.
So this is increasingly similar to something that BBD tried in our testing, and clearly this would be a favorite of our own caster Riley Knight. Hello. You can hear him clapping here in the background, but what I was gonna say is that this is kind of a take of the white-black deck that we saw earlier on the slide, where the idea is that you splash for more powerful 5-drops and a better late game in something like the Teferi or the Scarab God, in fact. And you play these Knight of Malice and Knight of Grace to be able to not only be proactive together with History of Benalia, since they're of course nice, they get a kind of Mina overrun there, but also they're great with their first strike to protect Planeswalkers like Teferi or Karn.
Well, it's worked out that the 1-2 punch of Knight of Grace and Knight of Malice never quite came together, and Disallow stopped Karn as well, meaning that while Michael Laurent has been able to get a creature on the battlefield, he's not really in the kind of spot that he would have ideally wanted to be against Javier Dominguez's control list here.
Yeah, so I think this matchup is quite interesting. I think that maybe Javier has a little bit of an edge game 1, as these control lists usually do. However, Michael has a lot of very impressive threats in this matchup. He has tons of Planeswalkers. I would assume we don't have his entire list just yet, but I would assume he has tons of Planeswalkers, a lot of good early interaction. His Benalia is fantastic against control. It's just one card that represents so much damage and multiple bodies, which is almost always just something that's has always historically been good against control.
So Gideon of the Trials came down and immediately gave himself an emblem. So as long as Gideon is in play, Mikhail cannot lose the game. Meanwhile, Teferi's in play on the other side of things. So if I had to pick the player that was going to lose the game, it would be the player with Gideon of the Trials in play.
Correct. Reason why we see Michael go for the emblem here is that having extra loyalty on Gideon doesn't really matter in this matchup, because Javier Dominguez, much as Michael knows, will most likely not even be able to attack Gideon or deal damage with direct damage spells. So the only way we're going to see Gideon leave the battlefield is probably with a Seal Away or a Cast Out or maybe a Blink of an Eye, which he has all of them in his hand.
Yeah, it must be nice to be the control player that has so many options, 2 mana open, all of it going to be able to be utilized here to deal with that Gideon of the Trials one way or another. And it may be that Javier says that he can afford to take the loyalty hit here, as there's only 2 damage coming through. Looks like only Gideon going at the Teferi here. So Castaway does deal with Gideon, and a little bit of damage going to Javier here, and we get to see what the follow-up play is. It's a cast out on Teferi.
So this play actually makes... I was a little bit surprised with the attacks earlier, where Knight of Grace attacks Javier and Gideon goes after Gideon. But if he's going to cast out the Teferi anyways, it's kind of nice with that extra point of damage. The only thing I would be scared of with that kind of attack is if Javier just lets the Teferi take 4 damage and keeps up a counterspell for something like cast out. But with the Walking Ballista, that's kind of a insurance against that if it takes 4 damage. So there was a lot of small tensions going on in that attack step, that's for sure.
Yeah, the Walking Ballista on 1 does have the potential to grow a little bit, enough mana available for Michael Laurent to consider that option. As things stand, Dominguez just figuring out exactly where he wants to be pointing this cast out that he has in hand.
You know, as we say, Teferi only costs 3 mana. How about Teferi that costs 2 mana? Well, if cast out removes the cast out and brings back a Teferi, that means with untapping 2 lands, that's basically only paying 2 mana for the very powerful Planeswalker, so that's going to let Teferi keep up Cellular Wreckage to protect it, and when you can keep up Cellular Wreckage to protect your Teferi, that's usually a road to success, that's for sure.
Javier Dominguez holding out for the hero of Dominaria, and here he's just having to face down another Knight on the other side of things. Knight of Malice does mean that Knight of Grace is now attacking for 3 points of first strike.
Interesting, yep. So attacking.
Looks like it might be going straight for Javier here.
Interesting, I think. I mean, I would have preferred to attack Teferi here, because Teferi is just going to run away with the game, and it's going to help Dominguez to basically have a Soul Ring every turn on tapping those lands. But I'm not even sure it's going to matter too much, because Javier is so far ahead. He has so many cards in hand and a healthy Teferi along with counterspells, so that's just so hard to deal with.
So a Fumigate coming from Dominguez, that leads to 4 mana, a parting shot from Walking Ballista, doing 2 points of damage to Teferi, hero of Dominaria.
Yep.
And Laurent's seen enough. He picks up his cards. I mean, I think that a wise choice. Obviously, there's a lot of time left on this clock, but one of the ways that potentially his deck can get itself in a spot of bother, spending a long time on what's ultimately a losing position in game 1 and not having time to win games 2 and 3. This way round, plenty of time available for Mikhail, and I'm sure that this will be one of the decks that he has been thinking about in his preparations coming into this event, that he will have a plan for control.
Yeah, with both black and blue in his arsenal for cyber cards, meaning something like the Res, Negate, Spell Pierce, etc., he has the possibility to have a ton of different very powerful cards for this matchup. And also, as we saw earlier, a couple of matches ago, where Gregor Kowalski played a Glintstave Siphoner in turn 2 in the control mirror against Wafutapa, Michael Lorenz also has a ton of proactive creatures, which he can back up with these powerful deal breakers in the matchup, like counterspells the rest, or even have a board enough for Javier that he has to deal with it, and then he can resolve his own Teferi if he plays any in the deck, which I don't know, but I would hope and assume so.
So a question for you, Joel. If you're in Javier Dominguez's seat, obviously you're happy to have won your game 1, you've got plenty of time left on the clock, you're playing a very powerful control deck, all of these things we're very happy with.
So
However,
far, so good.
You are playing against a deck that is a little bit unusual. Based on what you've seen thus far, you know that it has the potential to be aggressive, but equally, the color combination it's working with could easily move into any number of directions post-sideboard. What does that do to your sideboarding choices?
Well, it's very difficult, right? Because Michael is going to have, tons, as you said, tons of proactive cards, but I think the cards you care about the most in this matchup are going to be things you can negate. I'm going to be scared about, when I see a Gideon Trials, I'm going to be scared about Heart of Kiran, for example. I'm going to be scared of Hisra Benalia when I see 2 different Knights in Knight of Malice and Knight of Grace. I'm going to be scared about Karn that I saw the previous game, cast out, and then on 5, clearly we have Teferi, etc. So I think I want a few negates, something that deals with artifacts and enchantments, say Forsake the Worldly, Invoke the Divine, something like that. Could also be pretty powerful. But Javier needs to make sure that he has universal answers to the board as well, because that's the way he can lose against a kind of aggressive creatures into the rest into another play, and then Michael can play towards Javier's hand. And if he fills his deck with just very narrow counterspells, it's going to be a lot harder for him to navigate it against such a game plan. So it's a kind of sticky situation for Javier, and I think he's going to make sure that he has tons of powerful spells in his deck, instead of just having to be reactive all the time. Such cards could be Torrential Gearhulk, it can be Lyra Dawnbringer, it can be a ton of things.
And I guess the good news for Javier, there are 41 minutes left on this clock. Even if it works out that things go poorly in Game 2, you can almost treat Game 2 as being a fact-finding mission if it doesn't work out to just be a straightforward win, so that he's in a better spot going into Game 3 of having the exact right answers to whatever questions it is that Mikhail Lorenk is throwing in his direction.
Yeah, you're definitely correct, Tim. You can see sideboarding being a lot different in Game 3 for Javier, much like you're saying. You can also make a plan, playing a very proactive plan, changing your game plan completely by boarding in tons of negates and Lyra, and just try to protect Lyra and win that way.
Well, we do see Lyra in hand for Dominguez, so just you wait. Turn 5 could be a big one. In the meantime, he does have access to, I think he's got a syncopate in hand, so potentially dealing with one of the early threats on the other side of things. Though on the play, it is Lorenk who's able to control the tempo a little bit, starting things off here with a Heart of Kiran.
Here we have it. And I think Javier has a search for his counter play that he elected not to play. Alright, so Concealed Courtyard for the duress. He also has the option to cast History of Benalia. We'll see what he goes for here. Ooh, and Javier's gonna get the Syncopate. This is huge for Javier, that he gets to Syncopate something so powerful on the draw. And also having a 2-drop that doesn't attack him. And he's just gonna pray that there's not a powerful threat like a Karn coming down here. And if that happens, I think we can see Javier being ahead.
Yeah, of all the sagas, History of Benalia, the one that's had the most impact in Standard just yet. And if there had been a duress plus a 2-drop that last turn, it would have been very strong indeed. As it turns out, based on what we know of Javier Dominguez's hand, not so many 2-mana counter spells, though. One would argue that if you expect negates to be coming in, then the negates would definitely be fired off against that history as well.
Most definitely, most definitely. So we only see a cycling of land, and I guess the rest. It's smart to cycle your land first. Just play your cards properly in the way that if you draw a card first, you know what your hand consists, and you can base your decision of what to take with the rest in a better way after having more information.
Yeah, it's a funny one because I think that it's easy to get into that mindset of, oh, if I'm going to be cycling, I want to be doing it at the end of turn just so that I've got mana held up. But if you're not a deck that's really taking that role where you're getting value from bluffing, having answers, you might as well do it sooner so you're working with more information yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. It does give away a little bit that it doesn't have something like a negate in hand. If there's anything you could give away, but that's about it. And I think it's worth it here to cycle first just to have more information. And knowing opposing player has a Lyra here, it's going to be a little bit scary if it doesn't have an answer, because usually post-board you don't have a lot of answers to Lyra, since you want to try to be as proactive as possible and don't want to have cards that are quote-unquote dead in your hand. And here we have good old boy that we talked about.
Yeah, it turns out Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, he's not too picky about what side of the table he comes down on. This time it's Michael Lorenk playing the big Planeswalker, and the duress on the previous term seems very prescient at this point, just making sure that you know exactly what your opponent's got going on, maximizing the chance of being able to resolve that Planeswalker. Now, yes, we know that Blink of an Eye has the potential to come along and deal with Teferi for now, but
so does Michael. He also knows about the Blink of an Eye, I believe, from the rest.
Yeah, absolutely he does. So basically, he gets to tick up here. He knows that he can crew the Heart of Kiran as well, get attack in here for 4 damage. And if he's spent his turn drawing an extra card, crewing his Heart of Kiran, yes, he's tapped out to do so. That's still not the end of the world.
We have an interesting choice because Javier drew a Glimmer of Genius, and he had the option to cast Blink of an Eye to deal with Teferi and then land his own Teferi. But then again, Michael can recast his own Teferi and exile Javier's Teferi. So this is kind of a small kind of mind game of how you want to be in this situation. But awkwardly enough, if Javier plays his Teferi here, exile opposing Teferi, then Michael could just have a way to crew the heart and kill Javier's Teferi. But he elects to go with Lyra. Interesting.
I mean, in abstract, I certainly like Lyra Dawnbringer quite a bit.
Yeah, the thing is here, if Michael has any kind of creature that crews heart, he can just tick down Teferi on Lyra and then crew the heart, and he's actually in a better position than the turn before. So this, sure, it makes it so that Javier cannot. What is going on here? Oh, I'm not sure where the Glacial Fortress is going. Oh yeah, it's not supposed to be untap, right? He casted Lyra for 5 mana, assuming that Glacial Fortress was untap, and I think he realized it himself here. We don't have sound from players here, so.
No, I presume that they've figured out this is the case. By the looks of things,
I missed it completely myself.
It may be that Javier was the one that realized this. A little bit awkward.
For sure. So I think the players are going to try to back up to Javier Dominguez's main phase, as I do think there's not been enough things happening since Javier casted the Lyra. I believe Michael has only drawn a card in his draw phase.
He has, yes. He's not had a chance to do anything cool in his main phase just yet, but we're there now.
Yeah, well, wait. Oh, okay. So they went back to Javier Dominguez's main phase, and then they probably just said that, okay, I'm not going to do anything in my main phase, so I'm just going to pass the turn on to you. A little bit awkward there. Javier probably didn't realize that this is going to be untapped, and now he has to decide whether he's going to blink an eye this Teferi in response to the duress. It's the only card that's actually targetable by duress. I assume he will do it. It's a little bit awkward if Michael has an untapped land and he gets another activation out of Teferi and gets the untapped 4 lands at the end of the turn. Also, I assume he's going to crew Heart of Kiran in response, so he gets a free crew. See if he remembers it. Nope, he did not.
Goes for the blink on.
Alright, that's a little bit awkward. We'll see if it matters or not.
A duress that misses.
No, it did actually hit a Teferi because Blink of an Eye got kicked, and then it drew a Teferi, and then Javier got to take that. Alright, so do we have an untapped land? Which is alright. Oh, he actually elected. Sorry, he elected to bounce Heart of Kiran.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I'm not sure. Maybe I would have hoped that Michael doesn't have an untapped land. Although you can kind of play a little bit of a mind game where Michael knows about the Blink and Eye and maybe doesn't even cast the rest if he doesn't have an untapped land. It's hard to say. But Javier is a pretty bad position right now because the thing about Teferi in this proactive deck is that much like Uncorp, this is a weird metaphor, but Uncorp Crasher works in the same way for the red decks, where it's not the most powerful creature, but it lets you hedge against Lyra Dawnbringer post board, as it can exert for it to not be able to block post sideboard, meaning you don't need as many dead cards against the rest of the deck, like removals. And this is the same thing with Teferi in this proactive Esper Benala deck, is that it's great at drawing cards, right? We've seen that many times before. But it also lets you hedge against Lyra Dawnbringer, which is pretty big.
Yeah, it's interesting that this notion of having a few cards in your main deck that maybe aren't as powerful as other options that you could have in your main deck, but that kind of free up a sideboard slot or two, when actually that's where the real pressure point is.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing in this format. Although Teferi is a pretty powerful card, let's be honest.
I have no complaints about running Teferi in quite a lot of lists. I don't know if I'd be running it in my red-black deck anytime soon, but if you're already playing both blue and white, then I think that the Hero of Dominaria is at least worthy of some consideration in almost any list, just does so much.
Most assuredly.
All right, well, the super team is trying to get it all together. Heart of Kiran attacking in, having been crewed by Gideon.
Okay, so Gideon's not attacking, interestingly enough. Okay, maybe Michael hoped that Javier would cast something like a Gearhulk that he could plus on.
I mean, I guess that a Gearhulk blocking is vaguely a concern. You want to...
That's fine, right? I don't know. It's not going to be able to plus on something else. I guess the loyalty is somewhat important. I mean, if you're getting to minus it every turn by crewing Heart of Kiran, the loyalty will matter at some point.
Yeah, these Planeswalkers pretty well protected, all told, given that Heart of Kiran with Vigilance can just both attack and block. Knight of Malice coming down here, meaning that there's still more problematic threats on Michael Lorent's side of the battlefield. Hexproof from white, potentially vaguely helpful here.
Glimmer, huh? So this is interesting. I wonder what Javier is looking for, because he's so far behind on the board that I would have wanted him to maybe blink of an eye something to be able to pressure one of these Planeswalkers. Maybe killing off the Gideon. If he bounces the Knight, then at least Heart has a shum to protect the Gideon. And now the Teferi triggers, can untap some lands. So Javier is wondering whether Michael missed the trigger from Teferi, I believe, because Michael didn't really make a notion to untap anything. All right, seems like that's going to be the case. Ooh, Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Well,
That's
that's
one
a good
thing to
answer
look for.
Planeswalker.
So I think Javier's going to wait with it until post-combat and see if Michael spends too many resources to kind of protect his... Okay, it seems like he kind of has a pre-combat. All right. Maybe he wants to see if there's a negate on the other side and want to kind of sculpt his play before anything happens.
So he sees a second copy of Heart of Kieran alongside Cast Out. That Cast Out, not castable, just this exact moment.
All right. There's an option to pick Heart of Kiran here as well, since Michael didn't respond by crewing it. So that's kind of interesting. Then he gets both Heart of Crowns, and there's actually just only one blocker for protecting these Planeswalkers.
Yeah, I kind of like that, actually.
Yeah, if he names Heart of Kiran here, he actually has 6 mana to blink of an eye that Knight of Grace, and then he can attack down Gideon with his Gearhulk. It's definitely an option, but I think it's going to name Teferi and maybe play it a little bit more safer in a way.
All right, so Teferi just being turned upside down there by Mikhail to kind of remind him, as well as all of us watching at home, that the hero of Dominaria is just going to be kind of watching for the rest of this game, or at least until Sorcerer's Spyglass gets dealt with.
Missing this Teferi trigger at the end of turn was kind of big, considering he has Cast Out in hand that he could have, well, casted, in order to maybe remove this Gearhulk in combat, or at least force Javier to use some mana to be able to do it. All right, gonna go for a double block. This is...
If there's a removal spell here, this could end very poorly for Michael.
So there is a pseudo removal spell in Blink of an Eye. And you could call this block ambitious, but also it just returns a creature to Michael's hand. So this is actually just a 2-for-1, given that the body of the Gearhulk is 1 card. But it forces Javier to tap out to deal with this. So it's actually not as bad as it might seem, because now Michael can unopposed deal with either the Gearhulks or the Sorcerer's Spyglass to make his Teferi tick again, and continuously try to stay on this board. But then again, the Lyre is going to come. It's going to be an interesting game. This cast out is very precious, that's for sure. It has a lot of good targets.
Yeah, after sideboarding it does feel like the tone of what Mikhail has going on is a little bit different to in game 1. I'm not sure how much of that is just actually down to the nature of his draws. We haven't seen a deck list from him. But cast out now means that Teferi is active and is able to get rid of one of those copies of Torrential Gearhulk. The other one gets bubbled, +1 on Gideon to mean that Torrential Gearhulk won't be dealing any damage, and Heart of Kieran coming back down. So a good turn for Mikhail, able to get a few things going here, but it looks like still plenty of glass in the tank for Javier Dominguez here.
But how do we deal with Lyra now? I mean, sure, we can sacrifice our Teferi to deal with it, but then we lost our Teferi, and there's just a ton of problems for Michael here. And we can see the game plan I was talking about, where instead of having tons of narrow reactive answers to build towards Teferi, instead Javier tries to play tons of powerful cards. They can kind of make a lot of move on their own. And we can see that just plan just come in fruition fully here.
It's a wonderful feeling, that moment when you've got threats on the battlefield, you've got a disallow in hand to stop whatever the first problematic play is from the other side. So Gideon ticking up on Lyra to begin with.
So I think Gideon ticking up on Lyra is actually fantastic here, because so it locks Lyra down, and as long as you can deal with this Gearhulk somehow, some way, or at least block it, it's kind of awkward for Javier because he has another Lyra in hand, and clearly they're legendary, so it won't really help him. So Gideon bubbling it actually works very well as kind of a pseudo removal here. Ooh, do we have a negate on the backswing?
Yeah.
That would have been
disallow on the Scarab God.
Wow. Jace's defeat, that works too.
Yep. So we have a resolved Scarab God. We have 2 Planeswalkers. We have Heart of Kieran. How much more does Mikhail Larenk need to be able to put away this game too?
Yeah, Michael is very much ahead here. I believe he forgot to attack with his Heart of Kieran. I think he could have used some loyalty in Gideon there, because 4 or 3 doesn't really matter in this situation. I guess Lyra Kieran's block. Never mind. Trying to grasp all the small value that I can find. But as we were talking about, Michael is very much ahead now. That Jace's defeat was quite huge, and this Torrential Gearhulk is starting to look less and less impressive on this board.
Yeah, Torrential Gearhulk, once on the battlefield, is essentially just a big old body, and there are plenty of things that can get put in the way here if Mikhail decides that he wants to. Looks like he does. Crews up Hardakir and goes to the double block on the Torrential Gearhulk here.
I love this play. It's fantastic. I mean, even if there's a removal, Scarab God probably comes back, and elects to put Scarab God first, meaning he feels like if Scarab God stays on the battlefield, it might not be able to come back with it being able to pick up a Torrential Gearhulk, for example, for another Jace's defeat in the... Okay.
All right, well, here comes Teferi on Javier Dominguez's side of things. Board states can get, also games in general, can get a little bit strange and complicated once there's Teferi on both sides of the battlefield, Joel.
To say the very least. I mean, with the extra mana of Teferis, we can see them just bouncing themselves back on the library continuously, and the one with the first Teferi in the play and the most Teferis in hand usually wins that battle, but when there's a few creatures on the battlefield, that just makes it much more harder. And Javier knew about that Torrential Gearhulk on top, elects not to remove one of the Placewalker on the other side.
One of the interesting theoretical conversations that happened at the Pro Tour was what happens in a mirror match where both players have Teferi, they're both bouncing their Teferi and have run out of cards left in their deck. So essentially, they're trying to avoid decking, and it's one of those hypotheticals that I'm going to leave for the judges. We've not had it come up on camera at any point, and I think that's something that all of us are relatively thankful for.
I agree.
Those games are not going to be quick.
I concur. All right.
As things stand here, though, the
Super Friends
Planeswalker
assemble.
party very much in effect over on Mikhail Loring's side of things. Khan, Sign of Urza coming along. And
I think I would have liked actually to cast Scarab God here. The reason being is if you plus the Fury, well, Michael didn't know about... Okay, so he has a 3-drop, so that makes sense. Okay, never mind. Because the thing in this Esper deck, this proactive Esper deck that runs both Scarab God and Teferi, is that the combination between them is so nice, right? Because if you plus Teferi and cast Scarab God for 5 and leave up 2 mana, you can untap 2 lands, and then you can activate the ability so much easier. So that's one of the hard things with Scarab God, that you want to get value from it immediately, but then you need 9 mana. Teferi makes that so much easier. But given that he has History Benalia and Javier only being on 11, I like double spelling here. It's actually quite huge.
And we know that Lorraine's deck has other knights than just the ones that History Benalia creates. That means that when we get to Act 3 of this saga, it can represent a pretty substantial increase in the overall power level of a board.
And the way Javier Dominguez sideboarded, also with Ballistas being one of his more powerful cards, there's a good chance that he doesn't have Settle the Wreckage here in his deck at all, meaning that History Benalia becomes all the more powerful, or at least cut a few of them.
All right, we're up to Act 2. 2/2 Knight tokens with Vigilance. Riley absolutely loving this. This is essentially exactly what he's ever looking for in a game of Magic. Lots of blue and white cards, lots of knights.
Yep.
What more could you possibly want?
So Javier had the option to cast Walking Ballista actually last turn, picking off both Planeswalkers and have a Ballista on one counter, staying in play. So I'm kind of interested why he elected to keep up Gearhulk instead, because it doesn't have any ways to actually interact with the board with anything he can flashback. He only has Disallow. So I would have actually liked him to cast Walking Ballista for 4 last turn. I think that would have been a fantastic play. Sure, he would have taken 6 damage, but I don't think that's going to change. Yeah, you can see him taking 6 damage here all the same.
So Argyle's Bloodfast coming down for Mikhail here, making use of all of those different colours that he has going on. Teferi, along with the Bloodfast.
Yeah, yuck.
It's going to be very tough for Dominguez to get out of this one. The Scarab God coming along, that one's going to get met by a Torrential Gearhulk, which presumably means a disallow from the graveyard here.
Seems that way for sure. So I guess Javier was just too scared of Scarab God resolving, and that was his big issue. But now Gearhulk is bubbled down. He won't be able to threaten any of these Planeswalkers, and Yeah, I'm not sure how you come back after both of these planeswalkers is getting activated once more in Michael's main phase.
Yeah, easy enough for Michael here to go wide. The history of Benalia also means that those knights that much more scary.
Maybe another revelation could do it. Are we getting into the classical situation of is there a card? I think so.
The Dumb and Dumber moment of, so we're saying there's a chance. Here comes Lyra Dawnbringer. A little bit of lifelink on that Angel may prove relevant, but there's going to be a lot of it needed if Javier Dominguez able to take this game too. Just under 20 minutes left on the clock as these players get to the latter stages of their second game.
Yeah, there's just too many things going on in Michael's side of the battlefield. He has card advantage now against Bloodfast, Teferi. Teferi can also deal with the board. And Javier agrees. I don't even get to finish my sentence before he packs up the cards. We can also see Doomfall there, which is very annoying for Javier to see because his game plan of having Lyras just gets so much worse when your opponent has Teferi. That's good both proactively and dealing with Lyra. He has Doomfall that does the same thing. It's just all these kind of problems just keep racking up. I think what Javier maybe should do post-sideboard is try to just have more counter spells post-board and try to play you play something, counter that, play that, counter that, and then hope to win on Glimmers and Teferi, and maybe shave a little bit on the creature plan. Something like Walking Ballista might not be as good, and maybe shave some of the big stuff here.
Now, we talked about how there's the potential for this game too to kind of have been a fact-finding mission for Javier Dominguez, getting a feel for more of what this Esper deck on the other side of the battlefield is really hoping to achieve. I think that coming to sideboarding this second time around, he's got a fairly good idea of what the range is from Mikhail Lorenk here in terms of what he might be doing. And that's the reason that we see Dominguez going to his sideboard once, then going to his sideboard once more as we go into this third game. He's going to be on the play this time, so there's a small consideration there that his 2-mana counter magic gets a little bit better. Those syncopates get a little bit stronger.
It does, yeah. I agree. It's a lot easier for Javier to... it makes sense that he goes for these powerful effects on the draw because it's a lot harder for him to micromanage his opponent. They can play proactive creatures, double spell with the rest on the draw, and then finish... because on the play, it's way easier to stop the 2-drop and then stop the 3-drop and then just get there with a Glimmer. And that doesn't really work on the draw. So I think that's what we're going to be seeing here. Although it is a little bit awkward because Javier is running a pretty high number of Essence Scatters, which are quite awkward in this matchup, given that his opponent has a ton of proactive cards that actually aren't creatures. So we'll see how he sideboards there. He knows his opponent has Knight of Grace, he has Knight of Malice. Maybe not all of them are there post sideboard, but
we know he has the Scarab God as well, though, and that is a creature that you really do want to stop.
True. It does cost 5 mana though, so it's just the most important thing for Javier is he needs to figure out how to have the best suit of reactive cards for the early game, because if he manages to figure that out. And I think he should lean more towards Negate, especially after he sees History of Benalia and Heart of Kiran, which he did not see in Game 1. I suspected they were there, but since Michael is playing kind of an unusual deck list, it's not obvious for Javier to see those cards. He kind of had to read between the lines to figure out that they're there. But I think if he figures out, as I said, the right reactive cards, he can definitely pull ahead in this matchup on the play.
All right, well, it looks like Mikhail happy with his 60 for this Game 3. And it's interesting to hear you talking about a lot of these levels that you can go to with control, because I've heard wildly differing opinions on where the real skill testing comes in this standard format. There are some people that are very much, well, you know what, this control deck, it's got Essence Scatter, that counts a creature. If you get a good target, take it. You've got negates that obviously the same is true, but of non-creatures. And it's kind of a... if you find a peg that fits the right hole, then use it. And so that makes control maybe a little easier to play against. But then a different way of looking at it is if you're playing control, you need to very carefully preempt even the threats that you've not even seen yet.
Correct, yeah. that is the biggest challenge from these control decks in this standard metagame is sideboarding. It's just very, very difficult. Also, even before the event starts, you need to figure out what your sideboard plans are against all these decks, because especially in the mirror match, you need so many cards to bring in because you have so many dead cards, which means that you need a lot of cards that overlaps in other matchup that also goes in against control, making it even harder. So that's the biggest challenge for all these control decks. While game 1 can sometimes seem easy, game 2 and 3 is just another story.
So we're kicking things off in game 3 here. Dominguez on a mulligan, kept on 6, and playing at a brisk old pace now. He recognises that with a quarter of an hour left to go in this match, he desperately wants to avoid getting a draw, would much rather pick up the clean win, lock up his spot in day 2, and just carry on trying to run up the score in this day 1. Once you're in the draw bracket, that almost inevitably means that you're going to find yourself against more control decks. And I'm not 100% that if you have a Dominguez, that's your happy place playing this blue-white list, because draws beget draws at that point, potentially.
This is interesting, because Michael went for a turn 3 History Binali instead of casting Duress and holding Jace's Defeat up, because he realized that Javier's important play next turn was going to be Glimmer of Genius, so he wanted to put pressure on the Glimmer by casting Duress then and being able to counter it, which did work. However, Javier had 3 Teferis in his hand, so which is, you know, you can't really...
It's a pretty atypical draw to have to play
around.
It
is, yes. I think Michael played very well in the way he kind of circumvented his spells, but got kind of punished by being a little bit unlucky by his opponent having so many Teferis.
A turn late, thanks to missing a land drop, but here comes Khan, and Javier Dominguez gets given the option of give your opponent another Duress, which right now probably won't do all that much, because we know that at the moment it's largely Teferi in Dominguez's hand.
Okay, so this was pretty important to find something like a search for his Scansa, because while he has the second Teferi and the Teferi on the board, Michael actually drew a very good card with Karn being a Duress and hit another good card under it in Gideon. And his grip is full, I would assume, of powerful cards since he didn't play a 2-drop. So while untapping with Teferi and full pseudo mana is usually a recipe for success in this particular game, that might actually not be the case. We'll see. So
Duress here. The new card that Javier Dominguez had drawn was Negate. We know the other card is still yet another Teferi. And Dominguez electing to play the Negate rather than potentially having another copy of Teferi snagged here.
Okay, interestingly, Michael... Okay, so that makes sense. In case Karn was ticking up, there's no reason really to play Gideon first. But if he's ticking down to put pressure on this Teferi, I agree with his play here. I think a lot of times people don't use the minus ability of Karn enough, and I think it's actually maybe the strongest mode against control decks, in all honesty.
Well, yeah, I mean, those creatures, if you have any other artifacts in your deck, get very big very quickly, and even if you don't, if you end up with multiples of them in play, things can work out very nicely indeed. Sorcerer's Spyglass here revealing another copy of Jace's Defeat, Knight of Malice, and Scarab God there in hand for Mikhail Lorenk. Given the powerful Planeswalkers on the other side of the battlefield, definitely a strong temptation to lock one of them down.
Yeah, Javier actually drew the 2 perfect cards in Sorcerer's Spyglass plus Cast Out, meaning he can deal with 2 Planeswalkers in one go. However, now that he sees there's a Scarab God on the other side, I think get a little bit more messy. However, his saving grace is that there is no actual creatures in the graveyard, so Scarab God is actually not as impactful as it could have been. We'll see. Okay, Javier's gonna wait with the cast out. He's not gonna deal with Karn, interestingly enough. He's gonna deal with Gideon, because otherwise... This is an interesting situation. I wonder what Javier is planning to cast out if it's not the Karn. I don't think Scarab God is as powerful as Karn on this battlefield, given that there's no creatures in the graveyard currently.
Well, we'll see whether or not Mikhail Lorenk agrees here. Tapping 4 mana, just figuring out exactly what he wants to be playing here.
Yeah, I think he wants to cast his cast at pre-combat to see if there's a torrential Gearhulk on the other side, as Javier has kind of played as if there was one, given that he only played a 2-mana spell, untapped his lands. And if Javier counters this, he knows how his attacks are going to be, etc., etc.
So cast out on cast out. In principle, that means that there's the opportunity to name something different with the Sorcerer's Spyglass as it comes back into play off the first cast.
I think actually Javier responds with the cast out on the cast out trigger,
meaning
I see. That if it gets exiled before it gets to exile something, it actually isn't removed. And the reason why Javier did this is so Michael couldn't activate his Gideon within that time frame. This game actually pans out to be pretty close. I think Javier has quite the edge because of the search for Azcanta. Without it, it could have been problematic to only win with this Teferi, but the search for Azcanta is kind of a ticking time bomb here, I would say. All right, 2 castles. Beautiful draws for him here.
Speaking of ticking time bombs, we're at under 10 minutes left on this round. At what point does each of these players have to start worrying about picking up an unintentional draw?
Well, post sideboard, I think it's a lot less likely that a draw will be the case for either player, of course. I think they might think about being problematic with a draw if Michael somehow comes back from this situation, because that means he will deal with a lot of resources that Javier currently has, as well as deploying some kind of offense, right? So that would maybe be the case, but I think Javier has enough threats in his deck with Lyra and Gearhulks that he can finish the game in time if it comes to that, yeah.
Speaking of threats, the Scarab God certainly qualifies, and indeed qualifies for yet another copy of Cast Out. We've seen a lot of them over the course of this game. The Scarab God chilling out just off camera there, because as long as it's cast out, it's not going to be achieving a whole lot.
Right, Javier is continuously keep drawing hitters here. He's not pitched a card with Search for Azcanta just yet. Continues putting them on top. This time it was a Lord Dawnbringer. Let's see if Michael doesn't have a response to this Lyra, this game can be over very quickly, because I think this is his chance to kind of claw back a little bit here. If he removes it, he can kill Teferi, and nope. And we know there's is there a Chase's Defeat in his hand, or no? There's an unknown card, I believe, in Michael's hand here. But I think he had his window there to climb back into the game, and now I think Javier will just assert firm control over this game. Just making sure he protects his Teferi, resolves this Glimmer before going on the offense, and from there should be pretty smooth sailing.
So History of Benalia coming down here for Javier Dominguez. He is very much on the beatdown plan all of a sudden, and sees a cast out from Mikel Lorenc. I believe this is now the 4th cast out of the game thus far.
Is it 4 or 5? I'm not sure.
We're definitely getting into pretty substantial amounts of things being cast in all sorts of directions.
Yeah, this cast out is, as I said, a turn too late, but it will be able to deal with this Teferi, although Javier might have gotten a little bit too much extra advantage from it, since he got to cast so many spells, including the Glimmer, in the same turn. And I don't think just Michael doesn't have anything. He's out of gas here, and even though he kills the Teferi, Javier has so many other things going on. He has another Teferi, as we know about, on the Geralt, Glimmer, land. He just has it all, I think. You just got to decide whether he wants to trade with a construct with his knight or not.
Ultimately elects to let Teferi hit the bin.
And we can even see a flip of the Search for Azcanta here, which, as we all know, with Teferi, not bad.
They definitely play nicely together. Another night token off that History of Benalia. Lots of lands available to each of these players now, so they're potentially able to either play multiple spells or indeed protect the spells that they've resolved already in the game.
Yeah, we're getting into the point of no return here against the blue-white control deck. And there was another Chase's Defeat in the hand of Michael Lorenc. That makes sense.
And when you start getting multiple copies of History of Benalia, it gets quite impressive. They play very, very nicely together. These sagas, not legendary, though sometimes they can feel that way.
Yeah, it plays very well. It's just you just get more knights for the same overrun that would have only pumped 2 knights beforehand, and Michael just have to kind of think of the small edges you can get here. If you can maybe trade with a few knights before they're getting pumped by the history. Might be that Javier doesn't even elect to block. It's just going to be very hard for Michael here to come back.
All right. First, History of Benalia getting into Act 3. I kind of like to imagine that in that artwork, actually it's the knight sort of stood Titanic-like at the front of a boat. You can see the prow of the boat there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Now I can't unsee it.
Sorry, guys. For those of you watching at home, you're now part of my madness. All of these knights getting stuck in here, all, of course, getting a little bit bigger thanks to the first History of Benalia popping.
Coming in for a casual 8 damage there. Sacrificing 1 to the Knight of Malice. Yeah, Michael has to draw something awfully quick here to come back into this game.
I mean, I guess worth noting that one thing that Gideon's doing while in play, even in spite of that Sorcerer's Spyglass, there is a Gideon emblem in play.
True.
And that emblem will mean that as long as Gideon of the Trials remains on the battlefield, Mikhail Laurent can't lose the game.
No, I mean quite literally. Also, it helps crew the Heart of Kiran while leaving blockers up for the other creatures against Javier. But these are all small things in comparison to the Torrential Geralt's flashing back Glimmers and Teferi in Javier's hand. And it's just... Michael tries to find the small edges where he can, but Javier has such an abundance of extra cards that it probably will not matter.
So these construct tokens, currently 3/3s, thanks to the Heart of Kiran also being an artifact in play for Laurent. So that means that he's got like reasonable blockers, certainly not super exciting blockers. Anything that he's blocking with here, apart from that Knight of Malice, will be onto a loser. And Invoke the Divine makes for a real blowout here. Life gain for Javier Dominguez. Those constructs shrinking such that they're no longer trading with knights in combat. Yeah. Big play from Javier Dominguez there in order to potentially scoop this game with just a little over 3.5 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, I was just about to say I'm giving this one more draw step, but we didn't even get that. It's an interesting game. I think Michael played pretty well in the early game, but kind of got punished by a trio of Teferis when he actually... I think he played pretty well, but got punished by an abundance of a card he's trying to snatch from Javier's hand there.
Yeah, you could see those guys just turning all the cards face down because they needed to figure out whose cast outs were whose. There'd been so many of them played over the course of the game, and the easiest way was to look at the sleeves rather than the cards themselves. And Dominguez there just sort of showing off the history of Benalia that was ultimately the integral piece of the puzzle for him to close out that game. Winning 2-1 there, taking almost the full regulation time in order to do so. And you know what that means, Joel? It's a sunny day in Copenhagen, and it's a day where ultimately the amount of magic that we can bring you from this round of winning in a little bit diminished. There are plenty more matches going on in our feature match area right now where players are looking to lock up their spot in data at the first possible opportunity. This is round 6. 6 wins is the line at which you are able to play on a Sunday. It does not mean to say that you can't necessarily get in there with wins in subsequent rounds as long as you've not picked up too many losses. But we are potentially going to be able to get a little bit more magic for you, and that will be coming relatively shortly after these messages.
I'm Chuck Lucas. I'd like to encourage everybody to come to the shows and experience all of the wonderful artists that are involved. Come by, get your card signed, buy yourself a print or some original art. Have yourself a good game.
Hello and welcome back to coverage of round 6 of Grand Prix Copenhagen. I'm Tim Willoughby, Joel Larson alongside me here, and given the length of the match that we had as our main match for our win and in round, it meant that we don't have quite a full match to be able to bring you in our time walk, but we are going to get a chance to bring you a little bit of a game 3 for one of our other players looking to lock up a slot in game 2, in day 2 rather. Löwe Rask on one side against Petter Sahurek, and it's blue-black mid-range against blue-white control, and the mid-range version of blue-black kind of interesting. It does have the potential to get down some early threats and be able to win a quick game.
For sure, for sure. This game is a lot more interesting post-board, where Löwe Rask gets to take a lot of his bad cards, and this blue-black mid-range deck is trying to play as much card advantage as it can to kind of circumvent that there's Goblin Chain Whirlers in the format. I mean, it does play Champion of Wits, it does play Glin's Siphoner, both down to Goblin Chain Whirler, but I mean, these are powerful cards, especially against a blue deck.
So attacks coming in here, early doors from Löwe, getting in the damage where he can. Sahurek on blue-white control. One of the kind of key lines in the sand for him is once he hits 4 mana so that he's able to cast Settle the Wreckage, potentially dealing with multiple threats at the same time. 5 mana means Teferi, 6 mana means Torrential Gearhulk. All of the really exciting moments in the game tend to happen once the blue-white deck gets a little bit more land in play. 4 mana there, leading to a cast out on Glintsleeve Siphoner, Champion of Wits, continuing to attack in here.
Yeah, this is kind of smart for Petter because he knows that in this format there's not a ton of things he has to worry about on turn 4 from the blue-black side, except something like a Gonti perhaps, but you usually don't run more than 1 or 2 of those in your sideboard, so he feels confident enough to tap out to deal with a problem card like Glintsleeve Siphoner. And he gets rewarded. There's only a Glimmer... Well, only a Glimmer of Genius, but there's a Glimmer of Genius on the other side, and which he then later can negate because Löwe Rask cast it actually in Petter's end step, which is interesting.
Yeah, the timing of spells and figuring out what to counter after sideboarding especially getting kind of fiddly because there aren't too many dead cards once you hit these later stages of the match.
I think there's almost maybe going to be a repeat of last match. We're going to see this again. Oh, I thought there was a disallow there, but this Lyre is going to be quite dangerous because we can see Löwe having a Jesus Defeat, which is naturally good against this blue-white decks, but I mean, does not deal with Lyre, so he needs to... Oh, there's an answer. There's 2 of them.
2 copies of Raska's Defeat feels like one more than Löwe needs, but possibly not more one more than he wants.
So this is very awkward because Löwe wants 7 lands for this Champion of It in the graveyard and the 1 in play, or the two in play. But if he discards a Raska's Contempt, Petter must know that he has drawn another answer for the Lyre in hand. Otherwise, the discard of the Raska's Contempt doesn't make any sense. Which means that there's a good chance that Petter doesn't run it out here, but elects to do something else.
Goes for a Walking Ballista for 3.
Yeah, which is quite good here.
Yeah, it means that if there is going to be a removal spell from Löwe, it's only going to get met with Walking Ballista, being able to kill off Kitesel Freebooter and potentially a Champion of Wits as well. Get back to Fairy. This is a much, much better creature for him to be playing in this spot than Lyra. I mean, he did need to look to the top of his deck to find that, though. At the point that the Kitesel Freebooter was played, there was really not too much going on beyond that Lyra in hand.
So this is interesting because Löwe kind of wants to flashback this Champion of Wits, but then he can't keep up mana for countering something like a Teferi that is returned to the hand from Kitesel Freebooter. So he's kind of has to figure out what to do here. I kind of like eternalizing Champion of Wits regardless. I think the effect is just too powerful, and it's something that actually isn't gonna resolve for sure in this matchup because you can disallow the activated ability still, and drawing 4 cards and discarding 2 and having a 4/4. I mean, I don't mind.
Can't quite make out how many lands available here to Löwe. It looks like he might be going for a different option. It gets Liliana in play there.
All right, this is also a very powerful play. Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, it seems like he didn't have.
Yeah, I think it might be.
Didn't have enough mana. Yeah. He was 1 mana short, but Liliana is just super great here too.
Yeah, not too much action on Petter's side of the battlefield, and while he can use that Walking Ballista to kill off a couple of creatures, including the Kitesel Freebooter, play a Teferi to then send Liliana back for a while. He's not dealing with everything at that point, and he's still going to be facing down his Planeswalker getting attacked by potentially a lethal amount of creatures, and that's before you even worry about Löwe getting to that next land next turn.
Yeah. So Petter's main source of card advantage is the Fury, which is going to try to get back here and play, but I guess this board is going to be so hard to protect it unless he has better reactive spells to kind of that he can draw here. And the problem is that there's a good chance. All right, so he's going to elect to just deal with that Liliana that's going to wreck him if it stays on the battlefield. I kind of like this play because it's going to be so hard to protect the fear that's taking up unless he draws something like a Zelda Wreckage or maybe a Seal Away is enough. But then he needs to draw it immediately, and this way he can at least deal with the Liliana that otherwise just brings back something like Kitesel Freebooter or maybe even Scarab God that brings back Kitesel Freebooter to see if the coast is clear, and then you can protect it anyway. So I think dealing with the Liliana was paramount here.
All right, big swings coming in here from Liver. All of them going for Teferi.
And I like attacking with all of them here because otherwise, if one goes to Petter's face, Petter can elect to block with Walking Bliss on, say, the zombie and shoot down the other creature with Walking Ballista protecting his Fury. So Lovin needs to attack it with everything here.
Post-combat, Vraska's defeat, prompting that Walking Ballista to get fired off, and then Lindsay's Summoner coming down. Rask getting a happy little board going on here.
Well, this is huge. Petter actually drew a Disallow and has a land to protect his Lyra Dawnbringer. This is enormous. And Lovi also used his last removal spell for this Lyra. He draws a Gearhulk, but then again, Petter has the answer for it in the Disallow, and he doesn't have enough mana to cast both Gearhulk and keeping up the counter spell for Disallow. So maybe Louville will think about eternalizing something like Championowitz first, which I think is the smarter play here if he wants to make sure this Lyra goes down. Oh, okay.
That's
It was
Liliana.
actually a Liliana. I thought it was a Gearhulk that was drawn there, but it makes sense considering the Teferi.
We had a little clue. Liliana came along, and while there was Disallow, there was in turn Jace's defeat to make sure that the Planeswalker does resolve.
Okay, so now things are looking grim for Petter. He needs to draw something very good with this Memorial of Genius if he wants to come back into this game. Alright, search for Scanton on the land. We can't finish off this Liliana, but this Scarab God is just prompting to take over the game completely. Getting back something like Kitesel Freebooter in the draw phase is huge. He can bring back Championowitz, drawing 4 cards, discarding 2, only having to pay 4 mana for that effect now. It's just going to be very hard for Petter to come back. Also, there's like a Lindsay Siphoner ticking on.
Yeah, I mean, while Lyra clearly is the most straightforward source of damage on this battlefield, it's not going to take too long for that to turn around.
So Luve actually chooses to... This is interesting because he wants to know how to put his trigger, whether he wants to draw a card before scrying, or say he wants to draw a card before he has the scry ability from the Scarab God triggering, so he gets a little bit more information if he wants to use it in his upkeep in response to the scry trigger. It's kind of difficult here, but and I think it's correct to draw a card first because he gets to see so many cards regardless that the scry trigger would most likely be more useful after he draws a card.
All right, big old swings coming from Levi Rask here. We don't quite know where the clock's sat on this game. This is a time walk match at this point.
Interestingly, he doesn't attack with the Scarab God in fear of his opponent having something like a Seal Away. So that's why we can see that happening.
Field of Ruin, targeting Field of Ruin.
Like that. In Luve, if Luve chooses to activate it in response, Petter actually gets another card in his graveyard, meaning it's even easier to trigger Search for Escanta. Also, he wants to get rid of the Field of Ruin, so his Search for Escanta is safe when it actually flips. And that's the way he wants to come back here.
So the Scarab God looking like it's going to be getting a few more zombies in play for Liverask relatively shortly.
Yeah, Petter has to draw something quite dramatic to get back here. It has to be something like a Fumigate, and then he has to care off the Scarab God too. Losing the Lyra in the process. Yeah, I'm not sure what Petter can draw here. Maybe a cell wreckage thing, get him back into the game, but that also there's just not a good chance that Louis has so much time that he doesn't really have to play into something like cell wreckage either. All right, seems like there's some kind of judge call, but I'm not sure what's going on here. So seemingly he probably drew one card too few from Champion with trigger. He resolved the trigger fully, but didn't draw an extra card. The full 4.
So Ascanter has now transformed, and we're going to get to see Kitesail Freebooter coming back.
Draw
Thanks.
phase, I believe.
I like the timing on this.
This plays around something like Fumigate. So you can nab that before Petter has a chance to draw it.
Well, as things stand, a relatively unexciting bit of freebooting, but that's still a 4/4 flying zombie that we have in play. It being a zombie relevant for the Scarab God, it being a 4/4 flyer relevant for Petter Sahurik's enjoyment of his remaining life points.
Definitely. So the reason why Petter uses Search for Ascanter main phase here is if you find something like a cast out, he can deal with this Scarab God, maybe surviving because of this Lyra. But he's just Petter is grasping at straws here, basically.
Yeah, the life totals in Lerva's favour, the amount of cards in hand are, the amount of permanents in play are, and that's enough for Petter Sahurik to extend the hand while he picked up a Grand Prix trophy on his trip to the United States for the Pro Tour, not picking up the win in that particular game. And that is the last of our matches from this round 6 of Win and In. Riley and Simon will be back to give you a little bit more magic here from round 7 of Grand Prix Copenhagen soon enough. Do not go anywhere because we will have more magic for you soon enough. 8 rounds today. We already have a few players that have locked up their day 2. We will have more players locking up their day 2 in these subsequent rounds, or indeed running up the score after these messages.